Hello and welcome to Generation High Output. My name is Trevor. In today's video, we're going to take a look at how to replace the valve cover gaskets on your 1998, 99, or 2000 Lexus LS400. Let's get started.
Tools.
Let's go over some of the tools that I'll be using to do this repair. First, we have the new valve cover gaskets for the driver and passenger side. We have the Toyota FIPG, or formed in place gasket sealer, similar to a silicone or RTV. I have a new PCV hose, a set of 8 rubber grommets that go in the valve cover. I have a new PCV valve and gasket. I've got a spark plug socket, a gasket scraper or razor blade, screwdriver, 10mm socket with extension, a swiveling socket thing, new spark plugs, spark plug gap tool, and a torque wrench. And then to do this repair, I'll be following the write-up done by Richard Kwon, which was posted to the Lexus Owners Club. Huge shout out to Richard for writing up the procedure on how to do this. I will put a link in the description below.
Overview. I'm going to begin by removing the plastic engine cover, which is held on with 2 10mm screws and 2 10mm nuts.
For this repair, what I'll be doing is removing the air cleaner assembly, and then on each side of the engine, I'll be removing the ignition coil and spark plug, removing 9 bolts holding each of the valve covers on, removing the valve cover, which is a large formed metal piece. I'll be cleaning the valve cover, replacing the gasket, and reinstalling on both sides. While I have the valve cover off, I'm also going to be replacing the 4 rubber O-rings that are in each valve cover, and I will be replacing the spark plugs on this engine, which has 230,000 miles, and I don't know if they have ever been replaced before. You don't need to do that as part of this repair, but I'm choosing to do that. I also have a replacement for this PCV hose, and there's a PCV valve and grommet down here that I will also be replacing if needed as part of this repair.
Diagnosis. Disconnect the battery cables using a 10mm socket. Remove the bolt holding the air intake assembly in place and set the air intake aside. Remove one 10mm bolt holding the air filter assembly in place. Undo the clip and remove the air filter. Remove 2 bolts holding the air hose. Then loosen the clamp around the throttle body. Using pliers, disconnect the vacuum lines going to the airbox and slide them off. Remove the bolt near the airbox closer to the firewall. Disconnect the mass airflow sensor from the air hose. Remove the airbox assembly from the car by wiggling it free.
With the airbox removed, we have access to the passenger side of the engine. The valve cover is extremely dirty and covered with built-on oil. If you look down in between the fender, you can see where oil has been dripping onto the exhaust manifold. This is a sure sign of valve cover gasket failure. It's common on vehicles between 100,000 and 200,000 miles. The heat, age, and stress of underhood temperatures dries out the rubber gaskets, leading to leakage.
Passenger side. Each of the spark plug coils are held on with a 10mm bolt. I do not recommend removing the electrical connector from the coil as the plastic is very old and brittle. I was able to remove each coil by bending the rubber boot slightly and setting it aside, leaving the electrical connector attached.
After removing the 10mm bolts that hold each of the 4 ignition coils in, and removing the ignition coils, there should be another 10mm bolt holding this wiring harness down here by the firewall. However, this bolt is missing on my vehicle. After that, I'm going to remove the 9 10mm bolts holding the valve cover in place.
To remove the valve cover bolts, it's helpful to have a swivel ratchet tool or some very shallow sockets. It also helps if you have small hands. I had to remove a few electrical plugs and do a lot of maneuvering to get the valve cover out. Free at last!
With the valve cover removed, we can get a look at what's going on in here. You can see where the oil's been leaking onto the exhaust manifold. However, the gaskets are very firm, so we'll have to clean all this debris out as best we can. Looking at the passenger side of the engine closest to the firewall, we can see the famous half moons that everyone talks about. They look all right to me. With the valve cover here on the workbench, we can see the 4 rubber grommets that I'll need to replace. This is one of the new ones here in the package. And you need to pry up these 4 posts, remove the old one, install the new one, and then flatten them back down. 4 on this side, 4 on the driver's side. Let's take this thing outside and get it cleaned up.
The old valve cover is coated in years of dirt and grease. I'm going to begin by removing some surface debris using an old expired gift card, which is soft and flexible and should not harm the aluminum cover. Here I'm using a wooden popsicle stick to clean the inside of the cover.
Well, I spent some time with the simple green and a sponge, and I was able to get this valve cover cleaned up pretty well. Now it's time to replace the 4 spark plug gaskets.
The old gaskets were extremely dried out and crumbled into pieces when I tried to remove them. I had to use pliers to pull them apart, being careful to not damage the valve cover.
Got it. Wow. Now it's time to install the new spark plug gaskets. Off camera, I've cleaned each of these and simply press them in. If you've been following the Writeup, he recommends using a transmission stop-off tool from Harbor Freight to seat the gaskets firmly in place, but I'm going to use this old Gatorade bottle.
Take your time replacing the spark plug gaskets, checking to make sure that the new ones are facing the same direction as the old ones. The new gasket should fit snugly into the channel around the edge of the valve cover.
With the new gasket in place and this hose reinstalled, the valve cover is almost ready to be reinstalled on the vehicle.
I gave the valve cover bolts a quick spray with brake cleaner.
Before I reinstall the valve cover, I'm going to pull the spark plugs and replace them. If you're not doing this in your project, you can skip ahead. Okay, here on the workbench I have the old plugs from the passenger side of the engine and a set of new plugs. I'm going to use my gap tool to set these to 0.43, being careful not to go over. Now that the spark plugs are reinstalled, what I'm going to do is use that gift card to go around the edges and clean off this old gasket material to prepare for the reinstallation of the valve cover. If any of this crud falls into the engine, I need to clean it out first. At this point, I'm ready to reinstall the valve cover. Before I do that, I'm going to add some of this Toyota liquid gasket to the front corners as specified by the manual. And then there was also a little bit on the half moons, even though that is actually not in the write-up procedure. There was some there when I took the old cover off, so I'm going to put some of this on just a little bit in that area as well.
It took some careful maneuvering to get the valve cover back in place without damaging the gasket or smearing the liquid gasket material everywhere.
Well, how about that? It's in place.
I reinstalled the valve cover bolts and got them finger tight. The torque spec is only 5 foot-pounds, so you really don't need a torque wrench for this. I took a moment to wipe the dirt off the spark plug coils using a rag. At this point, you can reassemble the airbox if you want to, or you can wait until the end. I chose to do that now. And that wraps up the passenger side of this repair. Driver side. Now I'll be doing the driver side valve cover. I've started by removing this PCV hose, and then what I'm going to do is remove these vacuum hoses, remove the 9 valve cover bolts, remove the valve cover, clean it, install the new gaskets and a new PCV valve, and then reinstall the cover. Using a pair of pliers, I disconnected the vacuum hoses on the driver's side. Next, I removed the spark plug coils, leaving the electrical connectors attached. As with the other side, there are 9 10mm bolts holding the valve cover on. The swivel tool was a big help getting into those tight spaces. Carefully remove the valve cover, taking care not to snag any wires. This side of the engine is much dirtier because it has the PCV valve. Following the same process as the passenger side, I used a soft, flexible scraper to remove the larger debris. Carefully remove the old PCV valve and grommet from the valve cover. The old rubber grommet was hard as a rock. Once again, I replaced the 4 rubber spark plug gaskets or grommets on the driver's side valve cover. I spent some time scrubbing the valve cover with some simple green cleaner and a sponge. Here it is all cleaned up. Clean any old gasket material off the cylinder heads, and install 2 blobs of the FIPG gasket material as shown. Installing the driver's side cover was a little more challenging than the other side. The gasket did not want to stay in the channel around the edge of the valve cover and kept falling out. I had to check to make sure the gasket was properly in place before reinstalling the bolts. I was careless and accidentally touched the swivel tool against the battery terminal, causing it to spark. Learn from my mistake and take the battery out of the car after disconnecting the cables. Final steps.
Well, I've got everything buttoned up and put back together, although while I was doing the valve cover bolts, I did break one of them using the torque wrench. Again, you really don't need a torque wrench for this repair. The valve cover bolts only need to be 5 foot-pounds, and well, I broke it off, but luckily there's 8 other ones holding it on, so I hope it'll be okay. I ran the engine for a moment, and when I removed the valve cover, a little bit of oil had dripped onto the heat shield, and so it smoked for a minute as that burned off, and now it's all right. I did also have a check engine light when I turned the car on, and that was because I forgot to reconnect the mass airflow sensor on the air intake hose. So if you get a check engine light, go back and check all of your connections, all of your electrical connections, your MAF, make sure everything is plugged in nice and tight. When you turn the car on, you may also see a check VSC warning. That is the vehicle stability control system, and if you just give it a minute or two, it'll run a self-test and then that should clear itself out. The total cost for this project was $208 for parts. Total time for this job was about 1 day, but I did take a lot of time cleaning parts, and if you skip over that or work faster, you can be done a lot more quickly. If this video was helpful to you, please click the like button, and thanks for watching.